Peace of Christ be with you, Mark.
And also with you, Hatun. Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining me. So those of you who doesn't know who Mark is, well, you need to come to the planet Earth. So Mark, based in Australia, and he's a pastor as well as preacher, teacher. He's the fellow writer for the Middle Eastern Forum, as well as he is senior researcher fellow of the Arthur Jeffries Center for the Study of Islam in Melbourne School of Theology. He's got quite a lot of books, couple of things. 2 books of him I read, which one of them was the third choice, Islam, Dimitri, and Freedom. Second is the Quran and Biblical Reflex, as well as he's got book called Which God? So that will be the God of Bible versus God of Islam, as well as character and beauty of Triune God. Also, another book is Liberty to Captives. So I'll put those links to the description. You can check him out and then see what he's up to, and you can follow his work. So, Mark, you are in the future. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, it's good to be with you. It's amazing we can chat like this, and I'm looking forward to talking about some very serious and actually quite distressing things that are happening.
Thank you for joining us. So, approximately a month ago, 7th of October, Hamas terrorist organization decided to get into the land of Israel and murder children, men, women, even open the tummy of the pregnant woman and kill the baby. Lots of very bad images they were willing to share on the social media, as well as they took many hostages. It's been a month. I'm someone who speaks to Muslims, and I hear the reason of it. I'll put it forward to you, and then you can unpack for me if I am wrong. So this is what Muslims tell me, that for 75 years, land of Muslims, land of Palestine, is stolen by Israel. Palestinians have been bullied. They live on open air prison. They've got no life. Everything is just so bad. They want their land back. They want their freedom back. Therefore, Israel has been, for decades, Israel has been murdering and killing them. They are freedom fighters who simply want their land back. Is this correct?
It's a long and complicated story, actually. I don't think it is correct. At the beginning of the 20th century, the nations, the League of Nations, made a decision to partition the area called Palestine, southern part of the province of Syria in the Ottoman Empire. And one part would be for Jews and another part would be for others. There were also, from the late 19th century on, many Jews moving into the region, buying up land from Palestinians, from the local residents, and they brought economic development with them, and they were often wealthier. They were better able to make money too. The Palestinian Muslims particularly always objected to the Jewish presence. They rejected partition multiple times. And then when the United Nations sought to partition the country, and Israel had declared its that it was a state, it's declared its identity, then Israel was attacked by all the surrounding nations. And it's absolutely clear their purpose was to destroy the Jews, but they fought back and they conquered some territory, and some territory they didn't. So the West Bank was conquered by Jordan and occupied by Jordan and incorporated into Jordan, and the Gaza Strip was conquered by, or was taken over by Egypt and was administered by Egypt. Now, some Palestinians stayed in the Jewish settled areas, and they are part of the state of Israel. They're citizens in Israel today, a minority. Others fled. There were hundreds of thousands that fled, and this is what created the refugee problem. But I think over the last century, the Palestinians have repeatedly rejected a two-state solution. The only solution they will accept is maybe a few Jews in a minority position, but never in a majority. And they've always done one thing or another really to destroy the possibility of living side by side peacefully. they could have lived side by side peacefully many times, but they've repeatedly rejected it. The only outcome the political movement amongst Palestinians has accepted is the complete destruction of Israel. And means we have a perpetual war that just keeps going on and on. Open air prison, is Gaza an open air prison? I think it's ridiculous language, actually. You've got shopping centers and schools and hospitals, and yes, it's not easy, it's difficult, but and Israel has been guarding entry points in and out of Gaza, but it's certainly not a prison. In fact, policing and administration has been under the control of Hamas in that area for more than a decade and a half. So a lot of that rhetoric is just completely overblown. It's like when people say that Gaza is the most densely settled place in the world. It's just not true. Singapore is more densely settled, for example, than Gaza. So a lot of the rhetoric is just rhetoric, unfortunately.
So you phrased in a way that people didn't want Jews in the area, therefore there was war. So my understanding with what I'm speaking with Muslims is actually it has nothing to do with religion. It has nothing to do with they are Jews. It is this nation or this state was not there before 1940s, and they came and then stole our land. So it's not about the religion, but also you expressed West Bank was part of Jordan in one point. So are you aware at that stage that people were fighting for, let's so-called freedom, to get out of Jordan, or would they identify themselves as they are occupied by Jordan at that stage?
Well, at one point there was a Congress of Palestinians in the late 40s, and they voted to become part of Jordan because actually Transjordan, as it was called, was part of the Palestine Mandate. It was the east part of Palestine, and there was a vote that both the areas that now is Israel, Palestine, and Jordan would be united into one country. So that was one option that they were seeking. To come back to the issue of Jews, it's absolutely clear from the 1930s that the Muslims in Palestine were opposed to Jews being in power. It was as simple as that. They didn't mind Jews living in the area so much as long as they were 20 or 30%, but never in power. And that's what they objected to. They objected to a Jewish state. And it was about the Jews. If it was the fact that they weren't Muslims that they were ruling. And Hamas has made it very clear in its charter and its ideological statements that it is about the Jews. That is, that it's unacceptable that land that's been once conquered by Islam should come under the power of a non-Islamic rule. That's the whole basis of their resistance, that this land should not be ruled by infidels, especially not by Jews, because that is a violation of the principles of Islam.
So, sorry, I just need to understand that you are saying, according to the teachings of Islam, that if once the land is being occupied, I'm from Turkey, we kind of usually use the term, we liberate the land or we go and share life with people. So once land is being occupied, that land belong to Muslims or belong to Nation of Islam, so that in the future, if that land is being taken by someone else, that they still feel it is belong to them, therefore they need to go and take it back?
Yeah, so they take it by conquest, but they don't accept anybody else to have the right to conquer it back.
Okay.
So it's like a door. It's a door that it's like entering Islam. You can go in, but you can't come out. And land can become Islamic, but it can never become un-Islamic. So
you can come out dead.
See, the Hamas Charter says this is true of all lands that have been occupied by Islam. So there are Muslims in North Africa that are waiting to take Spain back. And India should be liberated for Islam. In fact, Islam had this. I mean, the conquests are called opening up the land to freedom. They don't have the idea that Islam, the Arabs, were an imperialistic occupying power that dominated, ultimately replaced in many cases the mainly Christian inhabitants of the Middle East. They don't think that was an issue, a problem at all. In fact, it's a good thing people should be so grateful to be conquered by Islam. But taking part of the land back, no, that would never be acceptable. So, I mean, Palestine was never a country. I mean, it was never a national entity since the time of the Roman Empire. And it was a part of the province of Syria under the Ottomans. It was not a nation. Actually, in the 30s, the word Palestine was used to refer to Arabs and Jews alike. So a Jew from Israel, what's now Israel, would be called a Palestinian Jew, and you had Palestinian Arabs and Palestinian Christians. But when the Jews chose Israel as their national identity, they abandoned the term Palestine. And so the Arabs basically picked it up and said, oh, that's us. We're the real Palestinians. And actually, they take it to crazy extent. So some Palestinian preachers will say, oh, there were never any Jews here. Never have been any time in history. We've been here for 5,000 years, they say.
Yeah, they take us to Bible and then say, even Bible talks about us. This land is belong to us.
And of course, that doesn't say that. But they have this replacement. It's not only a replacement theology, that is, Islam replaces other religions. It's a geographical replacement as well. Like Islam has taken over this land. No one else is ever allowed to have been here before. In fact, there have been Jews in the region from Roman time to the present. What really made the Arab movement really angry was that more and more Jews moved to the area and they began to buy up land, they began to settle, and their numbers increased. And then they fought for their survival. And to be quite frank, if they hadn't fought in 1948, if they hadn't won victories, they would have been massacred by Egypt, by Jordan, by Syria, by the surrounding nations. And you know, it's really incredibly inconsistent and hypocritical, because the Muslims claim the right to conquer the world, but if anyone else conquers anything that belongs to them, that's a kind of crime against humanity. And there's no reciprocity. It's only a one-way street.
Would you say that is like something human heart is like very bad? We want the things that are not belong to us, and then we want more, and then we want more. Do you think that is just like failed human beings, or there is something in the ideology of Islam encourages or commanded its followers to do so?
Oh, it's definitely Islamic teaching. So Islam says, in the Quran, it says that Muslims are the best people that Allah has raised up for humankind. They command what's right and they forbid what's wrong. Now, you can't do that unless you're in power. And in fact, there's a verse that says the whole earth belongs to Islam, belongs to the people of God. And there's lots of teachings in the Quran that support this. So there's an idea of succeeding, so that there's stories about older peoples that were wiped out and then believers came and replaced them. So this idea of physically replacing people by later peoples is part of the teachings of Islam. That is, Muslims will replace the unbelievers who will be wiped out. In fact, that's what Muhammad's followers did. They killed their opponents, took over their property. Muhammad killed a whole tribe of Jews the Quraysh. He killed them all and took over their wives and children as slaves and took over their properties. And he did the same for many Jews in other settlements as well. So yeah, it's part of it's. Islam is sort of wired for that. It sees conquest as righteous if it does it, but terrible evil if anyone else does it. There's never been an apology for Islamic conquest. There's never been any act of contrition or regret over the millions killed, the displaced and enslaved. It's just part of the glorious past of Islam.
Would you say it is wrong to use the term Israel occupied Palestine?
Yes, I think
occupation, will it be wrong to use?
I think it's wrong for various reasons. One is, well, it's Islamic perspective. They're living in and controlling an area that should be Islamic, so that's a religious perspective. Israel is a state like other state. It's fought for its right to exist, as other states have as well, and it occupies its own territory. It has not been occupying Gaza. It does control the West Bank. And that's a complicated story, because you do have settlers seeking to Judaize areas, and as well as the Palestinian Arabs living in that area. I think the whole label of Palestine is really problematic as well. I think it's a mistake. You know, when the Turks, the Ottomans, occupied Palestine for centuries, no one said, "Oh, this is a wicked or evil occupying force, and we have to conduct jihad against the Ottomans until we drive them out and free our beautiful, noble land of Palestine." You know, Arabs in the region didn't have that ideology, and the reason they didn't is because the Ottomans were Muslims and they were ruling on behalf of Islam. And there's a principle in Islam that if someone is ruling on behalf of Islam, you should obey them. But doesn't work for Jews.
In our history lessons, we learned that actually, like, we never conquered them, we liberated them. We simply went there to share life, and then they've got all these beautiful customs and cultures because we enrich them. So that's what kind of they teach us at schools.
Yes, and the Sultan's harems were full of Christian women who'd been liberated from Georgia and Eastern Europe and lands to the north and become his sex slaves. That was their liberation.
Yeah.
You know, this is a completely distorted view of history. It's not a very humble view of history. It's a view of which says that we were always right and the infidels are always wrong. I mean, this is a big problem too, because there's so many negative stereotypes about the Jews in the Quran. They're cowardly, they won't fight, they start wars, you can't trust them, they lie. And all those stereotypes just keep on being preached by Hamas all the time. So there's this message of hatred that dehumanizes them. And that dehumanization is part of the reason why those 1,400 or 1,500 people were killed so brutally. That you treat people as, the Quran even says that Jews were changed into apes and pigs, and so Hamas preachers will call the Jews apes and pigs. So this dehumanization, which is hardwired into Islam, is one of the reasons the conflict keeps going on and on.
Yeah. So from early age, if you train your child to hate people because of their faith, then once they grow up, what are they going to become? They are going to become more haters. And therefore, it is not surprising that people are being killed simply because they do not share the same belief with religion of Islam. So on the 7th of October, I was out of the country, so I just saw on the news that people are running for their life from the concert, and then within a couple of hours, it was the pictures where Hamas terrorists were like recording and then putting that on the social media, what they were doing to the woman, what they were doing to the kids, even to the elderly. And it was, I think, that day or following day, demonstrations start taking place in England to stand with Palestine against what Israel is doing. It was just like a day after just what happened. What is your reaction? Like, how suddenly world forgot that terror, and then we start focusing on the terrorists and then try to glorify the terrorists, and then how can we have the terrorists? How can we come alongside of the terrorists?
Yes, well, in Australia, in Sydney, there was a demonstration a day or two later, a marching through the town, and the Muslims in that demonstration were chanting, "Gas the Jews, gas the Jews, gas the Jews." This is in the heart of Sydney. The police just watched. They just watched. I think what happened is that simultaneously with the attack in Israel, a word was sent out from Hamas to Muslim organizations around the world, and particularly in the West, to start protesting. That was organized, absolutely organized. And so you've got, it's actually a threatening show of force. Like, Hamas has called for Muslims all over the world to rise up and to show that they are men of steel, you know. And so what happens is that the police, for example, in the UK or in Australia, who've been trained for many years to this sensitivity training to be, you know, protective of these multicultural variation, different types of people, and respectful of difference and respectful of Muslims. This has been an issue that's caused lots of problems in the UK with the rape gangs as well. that the police have not really been willing sometimes to pursue the perpetrators. So the police have been sensitized, and so they don't have the will to stop the protests. They don't want to intervene and stop people shouting "Gas the Jews." They prefer just to stand and watch. This has made it has caused a lot of terror in the hearts of Jews in the West. It makes it very frightening. To wear a sign of your Jewish identity becomes frightening, and they want that. They want to cause fear. So those protests are about showing power and showing fear. Of course, the radicals amongst the Muslim community, and not all are radical, but the radicals amongst the community have not gone away. So in Britain, the security forces have been tracking thousands and thousands of potential jihadis for many, many years. That's no secret. And the radical views that were, you'd often find around the time of 9/11 on websites, they haven't gone away. They're still being taught in the mosques. But this event of killing so many Jews all at once, it was very inspirational to the radicals. It's like, we have won a victory. Shame has been taken away from us. We are proud that we have been able to outsmart these people. And these killings show that we will kill them too. It's like a down payment. Take that. This is what we want to do with you. So this causes a rising up of enthusiasm. I mean, one of the preachers from Al-Azhar University was saying, you've taken away our shame. You have made us feel human again. Or a preacher in Melbourne said, this is a day of happiness. This is a day of joy. This is the day we've been waiting for. He's speaking about babies being shot and people's eyeballs being dug out of faces and women being raped until their pelvis breaks. This is what that means. And now the issue for people in the West, for people who are not Muslims, how do they respond to all this? And sometimes people speak about fight or flight. When you're cornered, you can fight or you can run away. But there's another response that a dog can make, and that is to tend and befriend. So someone threatens the dog and the dog comes up and licks your feet. And I think that's one of the responses to terror, that you reach out in friendship. You refuse to accept. You deny the terror and you try and overcome it. And through positive relationship. And I think that's a risk for people, say in Britain or the UK. They see this thing as actually very frightening. So they say, oh, we will be friends with Muslims. We will advocate them. We will support them. And then we'll be safe. Because basically this is terrifying.
Wouldn't you say that's would take back what we little bit only expressed in 1920s? There were Jews and there were Muslims, Christians, atheists, all that people group in the land of Israel, Palestine. Palestine people have no problem with Jews because they were just minority and they were friendly towards one another. And then once they took over, then things changed. So once I think it is shame we become alongside of the terrorists by I am your friend, I am your friend. Once they take over, I don't think they are gonna think me as their friend.
I wouldn't say
Jews on 7th October.
Well, some were friends, but there were also a series of pogroms and attacks against Jews in the late 19th and 20th century in Palestine. It wasn't perfect. And look, visitors to the Ottoman Empire in the 19th and 18th century speak about how terribly Jews were treated by Muslims at that time. But they were tolerated. But they're only tolerated as long as they don't have power, as long as they don't have weapons. One of the principles of the Dhimma, the covenant of Christians or Jews living under Islam, is that they were not allowed to have any means of defending themselves. So they were tolerated, but in a very vulnerable state. So this idea that the Jews would fight for themselves was very shocking. The Quran says that Jews won't fight. It says they'll run away, they'll turn away. And repeatedly, Muslims have thought, oh, we'll defeat them easily. We're Muslims. They're Jews. They love life. They say, you love life, we love death. So we're willing to die, but you'll surrender rather than die. And they've said that again and again. And every time they've kind of depended on that, they've been defeated. But there's the constant religious script that inspires these sorts of attacks.
Yeah, it was very helpful. You pointed out how people were celebrating and then expressing that now their shame is being taken away. Now they can feel human again because what Hamas did on 7th of October. Versus I am looking at those pictures and I'm saying, if there is a God who says, yeah, put terror in their hearts, Allah and his angels causes terror in the hearts of disbelievers, put terror in their hearts, and Jewish people couldn't even go on the streets, feel comfortable and safe. So you are causing terror and you are rejoicing in that. You are expressing that our shame is taken away. We can feel human again. It all tells me that you have a God who simply rejoices and being fed by the blood and suffering of humans. And that helps me to see like beauty of my triune God, because my God couldn't stand the suffering of his people. He stepped in and then gave himself on the cross for humanity. Just great way to help me to think about character of my God. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think there's a whole, sorry, may I just say, there's a whole series of what are called punishment stories in the Quran, where God destroys whole peoples who've rejected him. And they are considered to be the just and right treatment of anyone who doesn't support the program. So this idea of destroying peoples, nations, is a Quranic, it's part of Islamic kind of worldview.